Hello, friends. Welcome to Level Up with Debbie Neal. I am your host. There is nowhere I would rather be than right here, right now with you. This podcast is all about leveling up in all aspects of our lives. Thank you for being here. I am so grateful. I'm excited to be on this journey with you. Together, we are leveling up. You ready? Hello, my Level Up family. I am so excited to be back with all of you. And I know you're really excited. I have guests back for the third time. And so we've been having a lot of awesome conversations about hormones. And if you guys have been listening to the episodes with Dr. Tanda Cook and Dr. Katie Collier, you listened to the last one about the coffee pods. God, you guys, I was scarred because when I was having my coffee, I was having it in a coffee pod, in a Keurig, going through the plastic. I do all of this stuff to make my life better and healthier. And here I am drinking plastic every single day. I was scarred. So I have an espresso machine now. I'm thrilled with my machine. And I do have to say, I don't know the kind of business that Nespresso has gotten since we've launched that episode, but I've gotten many messages saying, oh my gosh, I use a Keurig too. Oh my gosh, I need to have the coffee that they spoke about. So you guys are obviously loving this. I don't feel like they need an introduction, but this could be your very first time listening to today's podcast. So I want to give them a proper introduction. And if today is your first time listening, I really encourage you to go back and listen to our last two episodes because I'm learning so much on each one of these. I'm dying to know what I need to change in my life, especially today. We're kind of talking about like mental clarity and health. Like I already know I've got a laundry list of things that I can, and you guys, I'm on a journey every day to grow my mind. And I can't even wait to see what I need to eliminate from my life today. Okay. So Dr. Tanda Cook is a naturopathic physician. She's a food expert. She's a published author. She's an international speaker. She's a blogger, as well as a health and lifestyle coach. And she is wildly passionate about educating and inspiring people every single day. She has a really long laundry list of an intro. Go back and listen to the first episode because we're going to give you guys a lot of just more information today, okay? And then we have her partner in crime over here, who's Dr. Katie Collier, and she's also a naturopathic physician, a health coach, a food expert, and speaker who has dedicated her life's work to passionately helping women become empowered in their health by reacquainting them in the innate wisdom their bodies holds to heal. So today we're going to be talking about gut health and mindset and mental health. And so mental health is so big today, and mental health affects every single one of us. And mental health, like I've learned so much over the years now because in my business, we really focus on the gut and gut health. And before I was building the business that I'm in, I had absolutely no idea that what I was feeding my body was also feeding my brain. Like I considered myself, I was an educated woman before I started this journey and had absolutely no idea if I was eating a fried chicken sandwich that it was affecting my mindset and my clarity. So I am so excited to have you both here today. We're going to cover as much as we can in our time together. And I guess we'll really just start with, the role of the gut digestion, like how it all ties into the mental health. I'll let you guys kind of lead here and then I'll chime in when appropriate because this is kind of your show on my show.
Well, it is awesome to be back and we love you so fiercely. And the importance of gut health is a huge study now. And, it was like 15 years ago, we essentially discovered a new organ where, we thought of the gastrointestinal system as just eating food, digesting it, absorbing it, and it coming out the other end of what we didn't need. And that's kind of how we treated it. And then once we looked a little further, we discovered that lining our gut were all trillions and trillions of microbes, bacteria and viruses and fungi and parasites. And the question was why? And so I want to be clear about when we say the gut, I think often people think about their stomach. And when we talk about gut health, we are talking about it starts at your mouth and ends at your anus. And it is I don't know, 9 meters of tube basically. And along that tube, if you think about it, from your mouth to your anus are a series of sphincters. So you have these like pockets. It's like between your mouth and then you have your esophagus and your stomach. There's a sphincter between your esophagus and your stomach. Then there's a little sphincter between your stomach and which is a pouch, and your small intestine. And then you have a sphincter between your small intestine and your large intestine. How I imagine it, Debbie, is I'm an artist, so I think in pictures. Do you know those blow up balloons that you can make animals out of?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's like a long balloon, and then there's like all these little twists and turns along the way. And that's so in each of those pouches, you have different pHs. And the reason is that different things happen in those areas of the down the line. So your esophagus is a different pH or acidity level than your stomach. Your stomach is a different acidity level than your small intestine. Your small intestine is a different acidity level than your colon. And the reason is because different microbes need different environments to do different jobs. And so that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the gut. It is the whole line of the tube between our mouth and our anus. And so along that tube, so then we discovered these microbes, and we call it the microbiome. So that's essentially another organ that we discovered. And it's a lot of bacteria, but it is also fungus, parasites, viruses. Like it's a conglomeration of microbes, hence the name microbiome. So then again, the question was, why are they there? What are they doing? And turns out that they are making vitamins for us. They are helping us digest our food. They are feeding our mitochondria. They are making neurotransmitters for us. They are making neuromodulators for us. They play a key role in our brain health, in our skin health, in our cardiovascular health, in our immune health. Turns out they're really important. There's about 6 pounds of them in between our mouth and our anus. Like it's no small amount. There are actually more microbes than there are cells in our body. I think it was Mark Hyman that said we're 95% bacteria and 5% human, and it's pretty accurate. So what we'll go over today is like the influence that lifestyle and diet and gut health has on these microbes, and then how it is directly affecting our mindset and our brain. Because again, what they do is they make these neurotransmitters and neuromodulators like serotonin. They make dopamine. They make GABA. All of it. Serotonin is like the happy hormone. Dopamine is the pleasure hormone and the motivation hormone. I mean, I just think about your whole like mindset and podcast is like really about motivating people to just live the best life that they can. And dopamine plays a huge role in that. 50% of dopamine is made in our gut. 95% of serotonin is made in our gut. And the massive amount of depression that's happening in the United States has a huge, huge role to play in the state of our gut. So, and GABA is also, it's like our relaxing hormone. Serotonin gets turned into melatonin, which helps us go to sleep. So you can see where gut health plays a huge role in all aspects of our life. And the question is, if serotonin feeds our brain, why is it made in our gut? And turns out these neurotransmitters not only feed our brain and our mood, they also help us poop. That's why they're mostly in our gut. 60%, I know I'm throwing a lot of numbers, but 60% of our feces, our stool, is sloughed off dead and live bacteria. So replenishing them on a daily basis, which we'll get into in the end, is really, really important. So food really matters. Gut health, things that you can do, and we'll talk about that in the end, to set your gut up to win, is so imperative to mental well-being.
So I know one of the questions that people are just really done that I'd love to just dive right into, because I know you explained it and it's clear, but like, how does this affect the mood, the mindset? Because there's people that are like, oh, okay. Like it really, like we're living in a world today that we're seeing more and more depression. We're seeing more and more really issues. How can someone actually make themselves, I don't want to say better or cured, but really take control of their mindset, maybe take better steps if they're feeling depressed? Are there certain foods? Are there certain things to stay away from? And what other tips? Because I'm still hooked on the coffee that we could be doing that could also be like affecting our mental clarity and our mood. It's so important.
It is so important. And I am going to let Katie take a lot of this one, but let's just first also talk about, so we have this giant tube, and and all these different pouches, and all these different pouches contain different bacteria for different reasons. And they're making neurotransmitters for us. They're making vitamins for us. They're playing a key role in our immune system. And so how are they actually connected to the brain? So they're connected to the brain, as we know of right now, today, 3 ways. One is through the vagus nerve, which is part of our peripheral nervous system. We have our central nervous system, which is our brain and our spinal cord. So that's the central nervous system. Then we have our peripheral nervous system. So the vagus nerve is named that because it's a vagabond. It like kind of sprawls out all over the body, but really innervating the gut. So the vagus nerve is one way that it connects us. Our gut is connected to our brain. Then the other thing is when we make serotonin, I'm just going to pick on serotonin. When the gut makes serotonin, it gets put into our circulatory system. So via the blood, the blood circulates up to our brain. We have something called the blood-brain barrier. Not everything is allowed through this blood-brain barrier. It's like a sieve. And the thing is, serotonin is allowed through. So our gut can connect with our brain through that blood-brain barrier, through the circulatory system. And the last way is these new cells that we've found called neuropods. And again, I'm an artist. I think that they look like neuro cells. So they're cells in our gut that have these long gangrenous arms that reach all the way up to the brain. So it's literally our gut is talking to our brain and our brain is talking to our gut. It is a bi-directional pathway. So don't think that it's just a one-way street. Like your brain is also talking very regularly to your gut. So it is a bi-directional pathway. So that's the way that it is actually physiologically happening. And then, through serotonin, through dopamine, through GABA, through inflammatory cytokines, which I'll let Katie kind of take. Do you want to take that? Take that over. That's where mood is directly affected.
When we talk about how the gut communicates to the brain, it's also really important to remember that this is bidirectional. So our brain is also communicating to our gut every moment of every day. And when we think about, how our world has changed in, the past 5 decades is it's been pretty detrimental to our physiology. The foods that we're eating, the social media that we're consuming, unfortunately, the Western world just has not really been designed with human biology in mind. And it has caused a huge upswing in these mental health issues. We're seeing higher rates of anxiety. We're seeing higher rates of depression. And where is that really coming from? It's coming from, the disruption to our microbiome because we're not able to make the neurotransmitters. So we're not, if we're dependent on serotonin to feel happy and our gut bugs are not making that, that's going to have a direct impact on how we move through our day. What also happens is in this nation of chronic stress is not inert, and our bodies can be stressed out through kind of 4 main pathways. One is the thoughts that we think. We've all been there where we can start thinking about something and our heart rate starts to quicken. We start to feel tense. We maybe feel a knot in our stomach. That's just from our thoughts alone is creating a physiological response in our body. And when that happens, our primal nervous system is built for survival. So, again, using the classic example of a tiger, if you're in front of a tiger, your body is going to change in order to best survive that attack, right? Now, if we are creating that same physiological response as if we were standing in front of a tiger when we're worrying about money or we're worrying about our kids or, we're thinking about an argument that we've had with our partner, whatever it may be, we are still having that same physiological response. And if I was running from a tiger, my body would not be prioritizing digestion. It's just not important. It's not important to surviving. I'm going to be worried about running. I'm going to be worried about breathing. I'm going to be worried about oxygen to my muscles. I'm going to be worried about a lot of other things, and I'm going to be spending energy on that. Now, what happens is our stress response actually turns off our digestion. Not completely, but it's not going to spend the resources on that. So Then we think about how that creates chronic inflammation at the level of the gut. Because if the job of the gut is to break down nutrients and to absorb them, so that they can then go feed our cells and do all of the important jobs that the nutrients do. If our digestion is compromised, we're not going to be doing that well, and it's going to be a harder job for our digestive tract to accomplish. When that happens, we create chronic inflammation. And the lining of our gut is one cell thick. That can become inflamed relatively quickly. When our body is inflamed, our immune system gets triggered. And about 80% of our immune system lives in our gut. And our immune system will create these inflammatory compounds that then can go in the blood. And they've got a direct highway to wherever they need to go. Joint pain, chronic inflammation. But those same inflammatory compounds, they can go to the brain. Now, when we think about inflammation, we need inflammation to survive. If we get sick, we get inflamed. If we injure our ankle, we get inflamed. If we get cut, we get inflamed. It is part of the healing process. We need our immune system to be able to function. If we're exposed to something that causes us to be sick, we have what are called sickness behaviors, and those are based on our immune system. So our immune system makes these compounds that will drive us to behave in a certain manner so that we go to bed and we don't spread that disease to other people, and we reserve energy to heal. 3 of those inflammatory compounds, among many, have a really direct impact on our mood. So there is a compound called interleukin-1, and interleukin-1 is the compound that makes you feel kind of malaise. When you get sick, you go to bed, you're feeling a little bit depressed, you're kind of tired. Now, interleukin-1, when that gets high, is also prone to experiencing more depression. Interleukin-6 is another inflammatory compound, and that one is responsible for kind of, when you are about to get sick and you're like, oh my God, I cannot get sick right now, I have so much to do. You kind of feel that anxiety coming on. That's interleukin-6. And then there's a third one called TNF-alpha, and TNF-alpha it makes us feel aggression. Like we can see this actually. TNF-alpha will rise in rugby players and football players 2 hours before they actually go out onto the field to prepare for potential damage. We see that in animals, I think, really often too. As a dog, kind of feels like it's cornered. If it doesn't feel well, it might snap at someone. Those are these inflammatory compounds creating changes in mood. So when we have inflammation at the level of the gut, we are making IL-1, we are making IL-6, and we are making TNF-alpha. Now, if we just have chronic inflammation, we're not actually sick. We're going to be feeling depression, we're going to be feeling anxiety, and we're going to be feeling aggression. And the unfortunate part about this is that it is bidirectional. So if we are feeling depressed, if we are feeling anxious, and if we are feeling aggression or aggressive, we're going to make these compounds. And if we're inflamed, we're going to make these compounds. So it's like the more depression you have, the more IL-1 you have, and the more depressed you feel. So it is at the level of the gut, even though it feels like it's miles away in the body. We think, the brain's all the way up here and the gut's all the way down here. How could they actually be in communication with each other? We actually know that it's through multiple pathways. And as we are more inflamed and as we're not taking care of our gut in the way that we historically have, we're seeing rates of anxiety and depression and aggression. I mean, just drive down the road anymore. Really, there's so much division, and there's so much, just that elevation in the mood disruption has really grown in the last several decades, which is directly correlated to what we're eating and the things that we're exposed to.
Which brings me to the next thing, because I always like to assume that we have listeners for the very first time, right? So they could be like, oh my gosh, I've heard this, or I've heard the other episodes and I know what to eat, what to stay away from. So there are people listening saying, okay, I've got all the above. I want to make changes. What are some things I can eliminate from my diet today, changes I can make today? Now, for those of you who know me, I represent a company that sells a program that's absolutely amazing. So you can contact me for that. But just on a regular basis, like, what are some things that people could hang out and be like, I'm done with this. I now know, I'm aware, I'm going to take steps. What am I putting in my body that's making me so inflamed? So I want to assume that people don't know me, they don't know you, they're listening for the first time, and they're like, help me.
I have to say the first one is getting rid of ultra-processed foods. we have created, every aisle in the supermarket outside of the perimeter is full of processed foods. And they are shelf stable for a reason, because they are chock full of preservatives. Now, preservatives are put into our food to make sure that they can stay on the shelf for a long period of time without growing anything funky on them. So they're not prone to mold, they're not prone to, growing bacteria, because it preserves the food. Now, if your entire digestive tract is lined with bacteria and living organisms, and you consume those preservatives in the processed food, they're going to have the exact same effect that they do on the shelf as they do in your gut. And so that is one of the largest disruptors of your microbiome. Number two would be buying organic when possible. Pesticides are one of the biggest disruptors. They blast our gut, because that's what they're designed to do, right? It's a pesticide. And those same pests that we would find on, your cabbage plant could very well be occupying your microbiome in your gut. So you are consuming, fruits and vegetables or wheat plants or corn plants or anything that has been heavily sprayed with these pesticides, and you are consuming that is having a direct impact on how well the microbiome was able to survive. And number three is, I'm not saying that people should get off of their pharmaceutical drugs, but it is something to mention, because the two really biggest disruptors for our microbiome are pharmaceutical intervention and pesticides. And that is just, the kind of harsh reality of how our body responds to certain drugs. And so if there is a possibility to talk to your doctor, or that you can find ways to come off of medications, that is something to just kind of keep in your back pocket.
Another one is just over-the-counter drugs. Those will all have been shown to massively disrupt our microbiome. And, what studies are showing is, like, the more diversity, the better. Yeah. So if you think of your microbiome like a rainforest, that's what we want. How many species are in a rainforest? Like, I have no idea. We probably don't even know, like hundreds of thousands, if not more. That's what you want your diversity of your gut to look like. That's what they're showing, sort of sweet blanketing statement of, diversity is better. Now, Westerners, the analogy that I'll use is, like, we're kind of the Sahara Desert. Like, there's very few, how many species are in the Sahara Desert? There's not zero, but there's not very many. It's not a rainforest. So, it is doing us a huge disservice to have a very small amount of these different kinds of bacteria, because they all have different jobs. And so when you're lacking one that makes serotonin, you're lacking one that is making dopamine, or you're lacking one that is making GABA, or you're lacking one that's helping you break down fiber, you're lacking one that is helping your mitochondria. It's like, you will feel the effects. And yet we think it's an us problem, and it's actually a bacterial problem, if that makes sense. So, it is, again, like how functional medicine works, is really taking the entire person plus their microbiome, because, we're talking to 5% of the human and the 95% of the bacteria, like really starting with gut. I mean, Hippocrates said however many billions of years ago that, all health begins in the gut, or all disease begins in the gut. And it's true.
We could have a lot of people listening say, okay, so what are the processed food? It's really anything that's coming in a box. It's anything that's coming in a bag. So it's like, it's buying the organic meat. It's having vegetables. It's having, removing gluten. It's just eating whole foods. And we're also living in a world today that's kind of lazy. Everybody wants instant satisfaction. Look, I'm not going to say that I have not had some mozzarella sticks from Costco. Like, again, but that's not on a regular basis. Like, if somebody serves them, it's Christmas, it's whatever. But there's so many things with so much preservatives in it. And again, it's just making people aware to put that stuff down and to actually take the time to meal prep, to cook, because it is a direct reflection to the mind. Like, we could journal all we want, and we could read affirmations, and we could, I'm all about building the mindset, listening to podcasts, doing personal growth. But if you're filling your body, your body, you have one body, with garbage, then it's kind of it's not having the full effect and the potential that it could have. If you have to feed your body and your mind with all of these good things to change, and what we put in our body really makes a huge difference. So I'm glad that you're sharing that, because I think people just need to throw stuff in the garbage and go to the store.
Yeah, and go to the farmer's market. I mean, that's really and we'll get to some practical tips here. I mean, what Katie and I really focus on what people can do and not what people can't do. Like the inflammatory foods are, gluten, dairy, like processed dairy, so processed soy, obviously sugar, alcohol, caffeine plays a role. Caffeine can actually play a really beneficial role in people's lives when used appropriately. So it's gluten, dairy, soy, sugar, alcohol, and caffeine are kind of like the rundown. Now, are there exceptions to the rules? Yes. Like if you go to the farmer's market and you can buy raw dairy and you can tolerate dairy, I think that's a great benefit for Susie Q over here, but maybe Paul can't handle it over here. So it is very individualistic because there's not one diet for everybody. And like what Katie was saying, anything in a bag, box, or a barcode, then you can't pronounce some of the ingredients, don't consume it for a period of time. I mean, that's why, the company that you're associated with gives people that 30 days of like a reset to really like actually listen to their body. So
I've even removed almond milk from my life because, if I were to get almond milk that really is supposed to be like 100%, I'm like, I got to go buy almond milk every single day. I'm like, I just have water with my shakes now because I feel like all of the almond milks had so many ingredients on there. I'm like, I'm just filling my body with chemicals. I'm literally just going to do water.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so some of the things that are imperative for gut health is replenishing them. I mean, I'm just going to start right out the gate. Fermented foods are going to be your best friend. You have to be consuming them every single day. And Weston A. Price was a dentist at the turn of the century, and he created the Weston A. Price Foundation. And it's a great website and resource for nutritional information. But he noticed that, all of these health issues were happening in sort of more westernized societies versus more tribal societies. And so he was like, well, what's the difference? Well, one of them was that they were eating the tribal societies with healthier teeth. And because he's a dentist, he was looking at their teeth. But of course it translates to gut health. They were eating fermented foods on a daily basis. So that's kefir, kimchi, kombucha, sauerkraut, homemade pickles. And so across the board, any gut health podcast, book, research paper you read will say eat fermented foods. Because like I said in the beginning, 60% of your stool is sloughed off dead and live bacteria. You have to be replenishing them. And fermented foods really is the best way to do that. There are some really great probiotic companies out there, but not all probiotics are created equal. You're really best to just get it from fermented foods and then add probiotics in as supplementation. And we're not talking about eating like a cup of sauerkraut a day. We're talking about 2 tablespoons. Like you do not have to kill yourself. A lot of people. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So, and people are like, oh, kombucha has so much sugar, which is a fact. That's how you actually make the kombucha. It's a fermented food. But you could drink like a quarter of a cup. You don't have to drink the whole thing to gain those benefits. So it's like very small amounts. Because if you think, under a pin head, there's like, how many billions of bacteria fit underneath a little head of a pin? I mean, there's a lot of them in a very small amount of material. So eating fermented foods on a daily basis.
And then I would say, the kind of second best place to start is really upping our fiber intake.
Mm-hmm.
So when we were hunter-gatherers, we were eating upwards of 150 grams of fiber a day. The average American gets less than 20 grams now, typically hovering between 10 and 15 if we're lucky. And fiber is the food that feeds the bacteria. So if we're not consuming their food, they're not going to stick around. So we might be able to replenish them by eating fermented foods every day, but we also then have to make sure that we give them the resources that they need and the food that they need. So fiber is a huge place to start. So those are things like vegetables. Vegetables are very high in fiber. There are certain vegetables that are higher, like artichokes are very high in fiber. Purple sweet potatoes or purple potatoes are very high in fiber or resistant starch. If you're going to be eating carbohydrates, so, regular potatoes or rice or anything like that, if you actually cook it and allow it to cool, the starch in those products in the cooling process, turns into resistant starch. And our microbiome loves resistant starch. So it's an added benefit for blood sugar balancing because our bacteria will consume that starch rather than it entering into our bloodstream. But it also is a really powerful way. So I like to tell my patients to aim between 30 grams and 40 grams of fiber per day. Now, it should be noted that when people are going from, maybe 10 15 grams a day and they're upping that or doubling that or then some, fiber can be kind of challenging on our gut. So a lot of people will say, I'm taking fiber, but I'm getting bloated, I'm getting gassy, I feel really uncomfortable when I increase the fiber. That is true, because what happens is when we're not consuming enough fiber, we don't have the bacteria that are making the enzyme to break down the fiber. So the more fiber you eat, the more the bacteria will create the enzyme to help you process the fiber. So there is a period of just kind of like grin and bear it and just keep going, because eventually your body will accommodate and be able to break down that fiber for you. So, I think just replenishing, but then also making sure that you're feeding them.
That's actually great feedback, because I've cut back sometimes on fiber thinking it's not having the result that it's supposed to have, not realizing I have to just, what you're basically saying is suck it up.
Yeah.
And you can
titrate up.
You can titrate it for sure, because it's like eating more fiber increases your ability to eat more fiber. Mm-hmm. So if you do just keep going, just kind of titrate your way up. Another really great way to increase your diversity of your microbiome and to really feed them properly is to eat 30 different plant foods a week. That is not 30 servings, that is 30 different foods. So things like, I look at my breakfast in the morning, I'm like, how many things can I cram into this breakfast, which is, sprouts and I love curry powder. So spices count, teas count. So if you get a blended herbal tea, please make sure it's organic. And then microgreens and dill and cilantro and, lentils. And so you can make kind of a veggie hash and get 10 to 12 vegetables, plant-based foods just in breakfast. And so I think that's really fun for people to kind of experiment with how can they get 30 different plant foods a week and how many can they get in one meal. And again, because spices count and teas count, it's a great way to add in that diversity.
And then, then there's some non-food ways that we can be supporting ourselves. So, we've really created a very kind of sterile, hygienic environment. We're doing a lot of antibacterial soaps, antibacterial all-purpose sprays. Our cleaning products are, built to kind of be a nuclear bomb to bacteria. And we, in our kind of effort to avoid germs, we have created a very sterile environment. And how our body gets exposed to these microbes is by putting our hands in the dirt. It's by being outside, breathing fresh air, skin to skin contact, hugging people. It's like we are a reflection of our environment. And so really being mindful of how much we are afraid of getting dirty, because that is where the microbes live. And that is also where you look at a baby when they are populating their microbiome as kids, everything goes in the mouth. It's just they grab everything and it goes in the mouth. That is biologically hardwired in them to do so, because that is how they are developing their microbiome in the world. And it doesn't end there. It really is by walk barefoot in the grass, be outside, allowing there to be a little bit more freedom around germ exposure. And then pets. Animal exposure is a really great way too. And so they've done a lot of studies with people who have had autoimmune disorder or bad allergies or asthma or any of these things that are directly related to our gut health, because again, our immune system, 80% of that lives in our gut. And they have prescribed them to go get a pet, particularly one with fur. So, cats and dogs are a great place to start. Horses are a great place to start. Anything that you're going to be kind of cuddling up with. That microbiome transfer from them to us is really powerful in helping us rebuild our gut. Mm-hmm. Well, I love it. And we, looking at countries that are, so Japan is one of the most hygienic countries in the world. There, it's a very kind of sterile country, and they have the highest rates of allergies in the world as well. And we know that actually exposing ourselves to those, and that's a huge reason, is because our immune system, based on our gut and how the jobs that these bacteria are doing for us, are hindered. And so we see, a lot of kids who are raised with cats and dogs or on a farm have way lower incidence of asthma and allergies because of that.
Yeah, I want to go back to, because what Katie was saying in the sort of in the middle of this with the those cytokines, that are inflammatory cytokines, IL-1, IL-6, and TNF-alpha, and what to do about that. And diet is a huge way to help with that. But there's something called TGF beta, and it is made in the gut in response to healthy food. And TGF beta will downregulate those cytokines, so those inflammatory ones. And they're high in polyphenol. So things like spices will help increase TGF beta, which again will downregulate those inflammatory cytokines and make us less anxious, depressed, and aggressive. So again, like food is medicine in all senses.
I feel like we're living in a world today that people are craving this knowledge. Like, one of the reasons that I just love this so much is this whole podcast is about leveling up, and it's really a mindset. It's a leadership podcast, but this is so connected. Like your gut is so connected, and I'm fascinated by what I learn each and every time that we're together, and I just feel like if people are listening to podcasts and they're already committed to becoming more, to being better, to becoming the best version of themselves, and the mind and the gut are so connected. So we were like super excited to do this because there's a lot of people today, whether it's depression, whether it's stress, whether it's all of these things. And we do have the ability to change so much through what we're feeding our bodies.
Absolutely, Debbie. And the thing is like they do go hand in hand, because if you are waking up in the morning and you feel anxious or depressed or low energy or low mood or low drive and low motivation, it's really hard to be the best version of ourselves out in the world doing the things that we love. The best part of my job is, yes, I can geek out about physiology and we can talk about, all of the ways to heal our bodies, but my patients aren't there for that. They're there because they want to go do the big things in their life that they're passionate about, and they want to have the relationships that are meaningful and powerful to them. And in order to do that to the best of our ability, we have to be well. And we all know it's like an age-old trope that, without your health, what do you have? And it really is true. And the more that we can learn about actually taking care of our physical bodies, the better that we're able to wake up in the morning and have our feet hit the ground and actually do what we're meant to do.
I love it. So what are some practical tips that we could share with our listeners to heal their gut and really grow that mindset, increase the motivation, increase, their mood? Because we have one life, we have no dress rehearsal, and we just want to be as happy and present and clear as we possibly can be.
Yeah. So I think Katie and I can just kind of fire back and forth. Let's start with sleep. Sleep is, I'm going to say, the master dial of health. The number one thing associated with longevity is community. And then from that, it's nutrition, sleep, movement. It's all the things that we are physically doing on a daily basis. I think especially for women, prioritizing sleep is a big roadblock for a lot of people. And sleep is when we heal, we regenerate, we detox, we renew cells, our immune system turns on, and we have these things called macrophages, and they go around and they're like the garbage truck of the body, and they'll just sweep up all the garbage and throw it in the garbage can and get it out of the body. And a lot of that happens when we're sleeping. And so anything less than 7 hours, your body just doesn't get the full benefits of sleep, which is that repair, regenerate, renew, and restore. So when we say sleep hygiene, we mean sleep in total darkness. We mean ideally the more hours before midnight, the better. We mean sleep in a room that's like 65-ish degrees, and use lavender to help lower cortisol levels. You can, drink tea, obviously getting off devices, and ideally no food for at least 2 to 3 hours before you lay down, because that will mess with blood sugar. And that also actually will mess with your microbiome and the bacteria, because they're eating while you're sleeping, and that messes your circadian rhythm up. I mean, there's so many things that are tied to a good sleep hygiene. So it's sleeping in total darkness, ideally 7 to 9.5 hours, sleeping in a cool environment, adding lavender, using noise.
Can I ask you a question about sleep while we're on it? So my boyfriend has sleep apnea, and it does affect his sleep. So would nutrition be connected to sleep apnea? Could nutrition make it better? Because he's also not somebody, sometimes you see somebody with sleep apnea, like, oh, maybe they need to lose weight. Like weight's not an issue with him, but he definitely has sleep apnea.
Yeah, and that's where, again, it's a case to case. A lot of times, sleep apnea does have a direct correlation to weight. It also could be uh, food sensitivities could be bothering him, creating inflammation. So then we, potentially, again, taking his case, but we could look at like potentially doing a food sensitivity test. We could do an elimination diet. We could, elevate his pillows. We could, there's lots of things, like, again, case to case. But it's often food. It is food related, because I very, very often have seen sleep apnea and particularly dairy having a direct effect on that. So, but yeah, sleep is, as I say, and this is like my quote, I don't know if it's proven, but it is the master dial of health. Please hold it sacred to, and get off your devices. That's just one of the worst things that you can be doing. And if you do need to be working after the sun goes down, on your computer or your phone, you get those blue light blocking glasses that will really help, because what that blue light is doing is it's stimulating your pineal gland in your in the center of your brain, and telling your brain that it's daytime. And so your brain it's very confusing to the hormonal system, and it's very confusing to the circadian rhythm. It's very confusing to the repair that is supposed to be happening when you close your eyes and when the sun goes down. So if you do have to be on your phone, getting those blue light blocking glasses is a must.
You're good. You're good. And then number 2 has got to be movement. We have to be moving our bodies. If we just take a look at your body, it's designed to move, and we need to be doing that on a daily basis. How that, kind of directly relates to the gut health and what we've been talking about here today is that when our microbes do their job and they create things like serotonin and dopamine and GABA, we have to get those products out of the gut and into the blood so that they can then go into the brain. And one of the best ways that we can do that is through movement, actually. So just taking a 10-minute walk after you eat, not only is that going to be helpful for your blood sugar regulation, but it's also going to help to move these compounds into your blood. When we do vigorous activity, it also helps to manage cortisol levels, helps to manage our stress. We also get endorphins. So, it can be challenging when people are feeling a bit low and they don't feel like they've got the energy. Again, it is one of those things that we kind of just have to put our shoes on and just go out the door and just start walking. You can start small. We're going to start to actually mobilize some of these compounds that are going to make you feel better. And you're going to start to get the endorphins, and you will get more energy. The more you move, the more energy that you'll have. And so, if we could really bottle what exercise does for the body in all ways, the ways that it impacts health, we would be billionaires. If we could package that into a pill. Unfortunately, we can't, and we just actually have to move every day. So, mhm.
I love moving. I love it. Like it actually makes, the other day I had just some, like, just stuff I was going through with my family. And I was like, I need to go downstairs and go on my Peloton for 10 miles, because it actually is so therapeutic. Like, yes, physically I enjoy exercising, but my mind had so much clarity at the end of 10 miles, because we hold in so much stress and it just doesn't feel good. So moving your body is literally the greatest gift. And it should be number one on the gratitude list, because you don't even realize it till you're not able to move your body. And then you just wish
Absolutely. And the
you did.
actual process of contracting our muscles will create molecules that the scientists have kind of coined as hope molecules, because they go directly into the brain and they make us feel better. Exercises, research shows, is more effective than, kind of traditional depression and anxiety medications for treating those issues. And so exercise, really, if you are struggling with low mood and low motivation, it also will increase dopamine. So 50% of our dopamine is made in our gut. The other 50% is actually made in our brain. And by doing things that are challenging, like exercise, that will increase dopamine in a healthy way. So we can increase dopamine both by, engaging in things like drinking or gambling or shopping or whatever it may be. We can kind of get those quote unquote dopamine hits. But we also can stimulate that dopamine pathway by doing things that are more challenging for us. And we actually get a steadier release of dopamine, which is our primary motivation neurotransmitter. So, yes, it is pleasure, but it also has a massive role in motivation. So exercise is a huge way of healthily increasing dopamine, where we're not going to get that crash, but we're just going to have steady amounts of it in our bloodstream to allow us to just generally feel more joy and more pleasure in our day-to-day life.
Number 3, is that what we're on?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm going to say it's fermented foods, because it's nature's way of replenishing our gut. It's nature's way of increasing that diversity. And, it can get expensive, but making your own sauerkraut, which I've done before, is actually relatively easy. And you can make a ton of it at a time. And like I said, 2 tablespoons a day. Debbie's making a terrible face right
Because
now.
I'm thinking you could get organic sauerkraut at
Yeah,
Costco
you can.
in a big thing, and I don't even okay. I don't think it was that expensive. There's this thing called opportunity costs, but you know what? Not taking care of yourself is more expensive. But okay, people can make themselves. Maybe I'll come over for that also. I'll come for breakfast, and then I'll come for a make your own sauerkraut party.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, people complain about the cost of kombucha, and I'm like, I mean, then get a different one. Like, do kimchi or do sauerkraut or do
This is
kefir.
embarrassing. I don't even know what kombucha is.
It's a fermented tea. Yeah. And it's very sort of vinegary flavor. It's kind of hit or miss for a lot of people, but it is a way to get. And Katie and I really try consciously to have a variety. So, like this morning for breakfast, I added 2 tablespoons of sauerkraut. Then yesterday morning, instead of sauerkraut, I took a few sips of kombucha that's in my fridge. So I just try and keep. And then I have kefir from kimchi from the farmer's market that I'll take a couple of tablespoons of. So I just kind of rotate through these different fermented foods, but that is a very, very easy way of naturally replenishing your gut, and will add so much health. And again, you're sort of more guaranteed than buying a probiotic. I'm also a fan of probiotics, and yet not all are created equal. But fermented food is just it's an easy go-to.
4, I would say we have to talk about stress management. Anything that helps you really get out of your head and back into your body, because our gut is talking to our brain, but our brain is talking to our gut. And if we just focus on, one direction, we're only going to get half the picture. So deep breathing is a great way to kind of, stimulate our parasympathetic nervous system. Tanda mentioned earlier the vagus nerve, and our vagus nerve is, comes directly out of our brain, and it innervates a lot of our organs, and particularly our gut. It's the kind of the super highway between our gut and our brain. And what we can do, there are certain things called vagus nerve exercises that will actually start to stimulate the vagus nerve, which puts us in that kind of calm, cool, collected, rest and digest nervous system. It's kind of like a little bit of a biohack, if you will, to get us out of that sympathetic fight or flight and into parasympathetic, and just kind of, calm the nervous system. So things like cold exposure, so dunking your face in an ice bath, or doing ice baths are kind of all the rage right now, but any kind of cold exposure is going to stimulate that vagus nerve. Because the vagus nerve also runs directly from the brain, it goes past the vocal cords. So gargling, humming, singing, anything that's going to cause that vibration can also stimulate our vagus nerve. Meditation. There's a list of, probably 15 or 20 if you Google vagus nerve exercises. What I'd like to tell people is pick 3 and do them every day. And the more often that you can do them, we might not be able to wave a magic wand and get rid of all the stress in our life, but we can start to help our body adapt and become more resilient to it. So anything that's going to help us really just down regulate, kind of calm down, quiet the mind, that's going to be hugely helpful.
I'm going to say go back to the 30 plant foods a week and pair that with fiber, because a lot of those plant foods is also the increase in fiber. So fiber, because it feeds, you're eating the fermented foods, which is replenishing the bacteria. Then you eat the 30 different plant foods a week, which has fiber in it that's feeding your bacteria. So, it's really focusing on plant foods. It's focusing on fermented foods that will all be wrapped up in fiber. And again, high fiber foods are avocados, berries, chia seeds, artichokes, pears, the potatoes that Katie was talking about, the potatoes and rice that are cooled with those resistant starches. So there's lots of ways that we can increase our fiber intake, and then just the diversity of our food. The last one I want to say is get a pet. Everyone should have pets.
Get an animal.
Fish don't count.
No, fish don't count. Fish do not count. I feel bad. I feel bad saying this. My brother, who's actually come back, he's been staying with me for a little bit. He has 2 corgis. They actually stress me out. Like, I need to do heavy breathing, and I'm going to eat the whole damn thing of sauerkraut today. They really stress me out. They shed everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you look like Chewbacca.
Yeah.
I have a cloud couch. I have this fabric cloud couch that he's going to come today for. I have to go spread Afghans all over it. I got to vacuum 4 times a day. So you got to be selective of the pets. Some pets are stressful.
We don't want that.
We don't want that. I'm just saying, my gut's going to be doing backflips while the time that he's here. And I have to keep affirming to myself, I love my brother and he loves his dogs. I love my brother and he loves his dogs. But they stress me out, and they negatively affect my mood, my mindset, and my mental health. So when you're buying a pet, be very careful the pet you choose.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's hilarious and actual.
Yes, yes. True story by Debbie Neal.
Actual factual.
My life right now. Okay. Well, I can't thank you both enough. It's really fun doing this with all of you. And I know it's amazing because I get a lot of requests for guests, and I send them over to Chase, and I haven't had a lot of guests on my show, but now I'm getting tons of exactly what you guys do, because I guess it's getting into that world. And I'm like, I already got my people. I got my people. I feel bad, but I've got my people. But there's a lot of naturopathic people now like, oh, I want to come on the show because I've heard this episode. But it's like, we got a thing going, so we can't have other people. So I love having you guys on here. I thank you so much for the value that you bring to all of the Level Up leaders that are listening, because leveling up in our lives is about our mindset and our heart set and our vision and our belief. But again, we have one body. This is our vessel. This is our vehicle to take us through life, and what we feed our body and what we feed our mind actually creates not only our life, but our quality of life. So I can't thank you guys enough. Thank you. And we will be back again for another episode. What are we going to talk about on our next episode? We have to think about it.
Yeah, no, I want to do either perimenopause and menopause, or the dopamine pathway.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we need to do menopause first, and then we'll go to the other one, because there are a lot of people, like I went through years of confusion. I used to be one of those people that when a woman would say she was going through menopause, I'm like, she must be weak. Okay. It's a mindset. And then when I went through it, I was like, I think Jesus is playing a joke on me, because it was no joke. Like, I'm somebody that's always cold. I'm like, right now we're talking, I'm shivering. I'm cold right now. I'm cold and I have the heat on. I was sleeping with my windows open in January. And if you were in my room, you needed a ski hat, because yeah. So it's no joke. I'm grateful to be on the other side of it.
Yeah. And Debbie, I just want to say too, like, when your listeners, when their feet hit the floor, we tend to get into our head immediately and out of our body. And we think that we can, muscle through, slam down some cup of coffee and race off to your job and forget to eat breakfast, and then you scarf down lunch, and then you get bloated, but you kind of ignore it. But you're like being quote unquote successful in your life. And I want people, your listeners, to, when their feet hit the floor, for you to put your right hand on your left shoulder and give it a big pat, because it's showing up for you every single day. Your body is showing up for you. And the best thing that you can do is make it and you a priority. And because everything else will follow after that. And what will then start to happen when you show up for you and your body, what happens in between your ears will transform. And I've seen it happen with myself. I've seen it happen with Katie, and I've seen it happen with our patients. So I cannot emphasize that enough.
I love that. I actually have a quick question that could possibly open up a can of worms. And if you think it's going to open up a can of worms, let's just not open the can of worms. Because one of the things you mentioned was breakfast. So like, what's your feeling on intermittent fasting?
So intermittent fasting is really as individualized as your fingerprint. Like Katie does it differently than I do, does it differently than Debbie does it differently than Nick does. And it also depends on a woman's cycle. So I'm still cycling, Katie's still cycling, but postmenopausal women, we do it differently. It's very dependent on blood sugar, their metabolic flexibility, your fasting insulin, your fasting glucose levels, your hemoglobin A1C, your lifestyle, your goals, your hormones. I know
This is a worms.
it was worms.
And
so
worms. So basically, okay.
A big bag of worms. But
so maybe just add that to our list, and we're going to have to do an episode on that.
That would be awesome.
That'd be a good one.
No, Katie and I have done several calls on that, and it's really fun because it is a box of worms, but I'm a huge fan.
Can of worms.
Can of worms. Yes. Or a box or a bag.
Right.
Or a container anyway.
Bag. We need natural worms from the ground. Tanda mentioned a tea, and she mentioned a company that we both love. So that's where, if you want to contact me, like we have a program, or I have a program with the company I'm aligned with, that if you're not familiar with it, you need to become familiar with it. That's how Tanda and I became connected, because she is so passionate about these products as well. And you can contact me at Debbie_Neal on Instagram, and I'd be happy to send you information. But I would love for you to let everybody know where they can find you, and they could learn more about you if they possibly wanted to do testing, if they possibly wanted to do hormonal, like all of the things. Where can they find you?
No, thank you. So I'm on Instagram. My handle is Dr. Tanda Cook. It's just DrTandaCook. And there's lots of free education on my page. That is what I am super, super passionate about. Katie and I often say it breaks our heart that we had to go spend lots of six figures on our brain to understand how the body works. You deserve that too. And so my page is really dedicated to a lot of education. And then my website is drtandacook.com.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you can find me at Dr. Katie Collier, Collier on Instagram. But we also run a weekly group. So if this is kind of your jam and you want to hear more about, hear us kind of geek out about health, we run a weekly women's group on Wednesdays at 12 Eastern called the Soapbox Docs. It's basically like a live format podcast. And it's this really just badass community of women that are looking to change their life, change their health, and, take care of their families in a different way. So if you want to find us there, you can sign up for that through Tanda's website at drtandacook.com.
Okay. So I love you guys. Thank you so much. Have the most amazing day. And to all of our listeners out there, we love you. Just keep leveling up and becoming the very best version of yourselves. Bye, everybody.